Kazakhstan gained its independence, it has taken the course towards building a democratic, secular, and legal state where human rights and freedoms are the backbones of the public policy. The 47th session of the UN General Assembly of 1992 has a monumental historical significance for Kazakhstan. That year, Kazakhstan joined the United Nations, and that was the starting point of the UN activities in Kazakhstan. 1 year later, in February 1993, the first office of the UN, the United Nations Development Program, was opened in Almaty. The respect for human rights is recognized as one of the guiding principles of the international law since the UN has adopted its charter. This principle obligates the UN member states to respect and observe human rights of those people who are under their jurisdiction.
1948 жылы 10 желтоқсанда қабылданған Біріккен ұлттар ұйымының
On December 10, 1948, the General Assembly of the United Nations ratified the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Later, the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights was adopted. All these documents have great effect and significance for human rights protection in our country. In order to comply with the obligations of the international treaties, the states must grant certain rights and freedoms to its people, as well as prevent racial, ethnical, and other discriminations. The UN and its specialized agencies are the main institutions that focus their efforts on the development of instruments of securing human rights. Today, Kazakhstan has become a full-fledged subject of international law and is involved in more than 60 multilateral international treaties on universal human rights, of which 7 are UN human rights covenants, which are so-called universal human rights instruments. The United Nations is an intergovernmental organization created to promote international cooperation. The organization was created following World War II to maintain and strengthen international peace and security. At its founding, the UN had 51 member states. The cornerstones of human rights protection are the international treaties. They are binding all member states. Various international agencies monitor the implementation of their treaties. They are the human rights treaty bodies of the UN.
Защита прав и свобод человека является краеугольным камнем деятельности каждого государственного.
Protection of human rights and freedoms is the cornerstone of every state agency and the whole state apparatus. Human rights treaty bodies are one of the instruments of ensuring human rights protection. In February 2010, Kazakhstan successfully submitted its first Universal Periodic Review, the mechanism of the United Nations Human Rights Council, which reflected Kazakhstan's significant process in human rights protection. The Universal Periodic Review has allowed assessing the achievements and challenges in the promotion and the protection of human rights. According to the Universal Periodic Review, Kazakhstan has followed 122 out of 128 recommendations. Kazakhstan intends to make every effort to maximize the full implementation of all these recommendations.
С развитием Казахстана, с изменением экономики, с повышением благополучия граждан.
As Kazakhstan's economy evolved, the well-being of its citizens rose. Different industries underwent growth. The program implemented by the United Nations in Kazakhstan has changed as well. From supporting the major reforms, we have already switched to expert assistance, to the development of basic policies, innovative models, and the society as a whole.
Самого общества Казахстана. И, конечно же, работа та, которая предвидится в странах со средним уровнем достатка.
On July 14th through the 15th of 2011, the UN Committee on Human Rights reviewed Kazakhstan's first national report on the implementation of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. The report was produced as a result of deliberate work carried out in conjunction with international partners, human rights NGOs, and Human Rights Council in order to further improve the national human rights protection system. As a member of the Human Rights Council between 2013 and 2015, Kazakhstan is working on addressing the challenges related to the protection of human rights and freedoms at the national and global levels. There are 10 human rights treaty bodies composed of independent experts of recognized competence in human rights. 9 out of 10 committees monitor the implementation of the core international human rights treaties. the 10th Subcommittee on Prevention of Torture and Other Cruel, Inhumane, or Degrading Treatment or the Punishment of Established Pursuant to the Optical Protocol of the Covenant Against Torture visits places of detention in order to prevent torture and other cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment or punishment. Human Rights Committee, Committee on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, Committee on Elimination of Racial Discrimination, Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, Committee Against Torture, Committee on the Rights of a Child, Committee on Migrant Workers, Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, Committee on Enforced Disappearances. The fundamental human rights under the Constitution of the Republic of Kazakhstan are the right to life, liberty, and human dignity, freedom from slavery and servitude, presumption of innocence, freedom from torture and cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment or punishment, judicial protection, privacy, personal and family secrets, protection of honor and dignity, recognition as a person before the law and equality before the law, nationality and freedom to change it, freedom of religion, freedom to choose a political party, freedom movement in the territory of Kazakhstan, free choice of residence, freedom of consensus, freedom of association, freedom of speech, freedom of labor and freedom of choice of occupation and profession, inviolability of private property, minimum wage and pensions, social security in old age, sickness, disability, widowhood, and other legal grounds. Health, receive a guaranteed amount of free medical assistance determined by the law. Along with the UN Conventions on Human Rights, there are regional and international treaties adopted by the Council of Europe, intergovernmental organizations in Asia, Africa, America, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. If one's human rights are violated, every individual has a right to file a complaint to any of these committees. Currently, there are about 20 complaints sent from Kazakhstan. They are being reviewed according to the standard procedures of the committees. Based on these complaints, the committees prepare recommendations for the state. Out of the international institution mechanisms on protection of human rights, Kazakhstan has recognized the competence of Human Rights Committee, the Committee Against Torture, the Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, and the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. Kazakhstan supports continued cooperation with the international legal control mechanisms in human rights protection that takes efforts on implementing the recommendations and bringing its legislation into conformity with the mentioned treaties. At the moment, we are working on the implementation of important international instruments, such as the Convention Against Torture and its optional protocol. The country has introduced a national-level preventative mechanism to ensure protection against torture. An individual and a government can apply to the UN Committee and the European Court of Human Rights. In this case, the constitution of the country to which the applicant is a citizen will retain the superior power. Adopted by the referendum in 1995, the Constitution of the Republic of Kazakhstan has embodied all the basic principles, values, and norms of the international law. The Constitution and our national values are the basic provisions that ensure peaceful development of our country. At the very foundation of our independent state, the President has made a decision on creating a Human Rights Commission, which was established in February of 1994. Kazakhstan's Human Rights Commission is an advisory body. Its main mission is to provide assistance in implementing the President's constitutional powers as a guarantor of rights and freedoms of a man and a citizen. Kazakhstan's General Prosecutor's Office has conducted a thorough analysis of every complaint sent by Kazakh citizens to the UN committees for review. Much is being done by the state in the protection of human rights and freedoms. The major international human rights instruments have been ratified. The National Human Rights Institutes have been established. The milestone document in the history of human rights is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights adopted by the UN General Assembly in 1948. It set out the fundamental human rights to be universally protected for the first time in history. and at present it is a common standard of achievements for all peoples and all nations.
Біздер халықаралық деңгейдегі Біріккен ұлттар ұйымының шеңберіндегі
Kazakhstan is a member to a number of UN treaties aimed at ensuring human rights protection according to the international norms and standards. The treaties obligate the states to recognize, respect, and observe human rights. Since Kazakhstan has become the member of the UN, the state has done considerable work in this field.
пәрменді қарқынды жұмыстар атқаруда.
It should be noted that the mere fact that we are discussing the existing violations of human rights is a great merit of basic law of our country, the Constitution of Kazakhstan, which guarantees freedom of speech. The Constitution contains the basic international standards of human rights. It is the main document defining the legal base of the country. In accordance with the first article of the Constitution, the highest values of the state are one's life, rights, and freedoms. The basic law of the country has become a reliable guarantee of success of modern Kazakhstan. Effective legislation has allowed us to achieve economic growth and social welfare, and has assured stability, peace, and harmony in our country. Nursultan Nazarbayev, the President of the Republic of Kazakhstan. For the past 2 decades, the Constitution of Kazakhstan has been the backbone of the national political and legal system.
При этом Конституция является
The Constitution is the main apologist that provides protection to the state in the context of globalization. Not all the ideals that are acceptable in other countries, cultures, and nations can be accepted and effective in our country. The country's progress in ensuring the rule of law had led to the decision of the General Assembly of the United Nations made in November 12th of 2012. Kazakhstan was elected as the member of the UN Council on Human Rights. This decision obligates the state to comply with generally accepted principles of human rights and freedoms of man and citizen. Every day, millions of people around the world are faced with the violation of their human rights, including discrimination, poverty, hunger, persecution, child abuse, slavery, and violent death. For the majority of human beings on the earth, the fundamental rights listed in 30 articles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights remain unavailable. Let's look at some of the facts. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. It is hard to imagine everyone's equality when 70% of poor people on the planet are women. No one shall be held in slavery or servitude. Slavery and the slave trade shall be prohibited in all forms. Governments have signed numerous treaties to abolish and prevent slavery. However, forced child labor is a modern form of slavery. At present, 250 million children from age 5 to 14 are forced to work. These children are deprived of their childhood. All are equal before the law, and all are entitled without any discrimination to equal protection of the law. All are entitled to equal protection against any discrimination in the violation of this declaration and against any incitement to such discrimination. In the Caribbean states, sugarcane pickers earn $3 a day, but the cost of rent and tools immediately turns them into debtors to plantation owners. By the end of the harvesting season, they are left with no savings, having worked their everyday meal. Everyone has the right to seek and to enjoy in other countries asylum from persecution. This is true about ethnic Kazakhs whose ancestors were repatriated from Kazakhstan, but in later generations have returned back. They left their familiar environment and their cultural habitat and moved thousands of miles away from home in order to search for a better life for their families. If they are given a chance to make the most of their abilities on an equal basis, the majority of them can become active members of Kazakhstan society. This can be achieved only through special programs and mechanisms on receiving and supporting the repatriates, and by helping them to adapt to their new environment. Perhaps the most noteworthy of our joint programs is the program on increasing the professionalism of the public service among the local executive bodies. This program is also aimed at promoting entrepreneurship, small and medium enterprises, women empowerment, assistance to Kazakh repatriates who have moved to East Kazakhstan returning from Mongolia or China. Ensuring that everyone enjoys their fundamental human rights will require a lot of change. It must be clearly understood that the simple adoption of all articles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is insufficient. The change can be achieved through a joint, constructive, and painstaking work of all UN member states, every state agency of each country, all the members of the civil society, and each one of us.